this is Pat Harrington. You're listening to TV Confidential.
Robertson with a reminder that we will replay our conversation with actress Julie Adams in our second hour. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Greg Ehrbar is with us for another look at recently released DVD and streaming titles that we think you'll find of interest. Greg, of course, is a two-time Grammy-nominated and multiple Addy Award-winning writer for television, animation, advertising, and publishing for Disney, Warner Brothers, and Universal. He is also co-author, along with Tim Hollis, of Mousetracks, the story of Walt Disney Records. You can enjoy Greg's animation spin column every Tuesday at cartoonresearch.com. For more information about Greg, go to gregehrbar.com. Greg, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, we've got a show that was a groundbreaker in its day and has become one of the most successful of the reboots of today. One Day at a Time.
The reboot of One Day at a Time currently airs on Netflix. All 3 seasons of One Day at a Time are now available on Netflix. And we've said this before on this program. We'll say it again here. I'm not one of those people who recoils at the idea that a network might revisit a television show, or a studio may make a movie based on a television show, or do a remake of a movie in general, because remakes have been part of the entertainment industry, the motion picture industry, since pretty much the inception of film and television, respectively. And going even further than that, it may have been Shakespeare who said there are only like 5 or 7 basic story plots from which to draw from, if you're a dramatist or whatever other form of writing, fiction, or for the stage that you pursue. So every story told is a variation of one of those 7 memes. So the idea of remaking a property like a One Day at a Time doesn't bother me. It all depends on the execution. I'm about halfway through the 2nd season as we have this conversation, Greg. I very much like what they're doing.
Yeah, I do too. I think it has a very, very appealing lead and a wonderful, wonderful cast. Mm-hmm. And Rita Moreno, of course, you just can't go wrong. The thing is that they call the new show a reboot, but it is a reimagining as well, because it is in many ways a completely different show, because the premise is a single mom, but that's about it. She's divorced, but that's about where the similarity ends. But that's because, for a lot of reasons. One is, why tell the same story again? Because it's not the 70s anymore, and there are issues and things that have happened in the country and different stories to tell. There's no need to tell those stories again. That would be your reason to do the reboot. Take that basic idea and tell new stories with it. So I guess that would be why it was done the way it was done. And from all indications, largely been well received, well liked, funny show, a cast that you care about, which is not as common on TV as much. People on a lot of the characters on TV are kind of cynical, not as well-rounded, not always the kind of people you really feel that you worry about what's going to happen to them. But on this show, you do. They're going through struggles that a lot of people in the, quote, real world are going through. And that's kind of one of the reasons people want to laugh at some of the struggles are, without it becoming mean, without it going too far. The show is a Norman Lear show, so occasionally it'll get into things. They'll sit down and have the discussions.
Which speaks to another point I've made, and I think you and I have discussed this as well as Tony and Donna. To me, more often than not, the reboots that work, if they don't have the original writer or producer involved, at least there is some understanding of the source material that you're carrying on, even if you literally are reimagining the characters. I mean, this is not the story of Ann Cooper. It's the story of a modern-day Hispanic family, and it allows them to touch on issues of race and immigration and many of the other hot-button issues that are part of the cultural conversation, right now. But it being a Norman Lear show, and my understanding is Lear is not just collecting a paycheck, he is actively involved in the show as well. It has that signature balance of uproarious comedy and then turning very serious and very poignant on a dime that no one did better than Lear.
That's true. And there is an art to that, and you have to have really good actors. The young actors as well as the older actors are really good at that. There also has to be more comedy. I've been watching a lot of his shows lately because of this being rebooted. And he always wanted to be a funny show. There's messages, and some of the shows are much more heavy and more dramatic than others. But I think he always, because of his background, because he worked with some of the greats, always wanted the shows to always to be funny more than anything else. And if you go back to some of the most horrendous episodes, I don't mean horrendous in quality, I mean episodes of All in the Family or Maude or One Day at a Time, where things happened in them. But if you go back and watch them, there's also some moments there that are slapstick, that are Three Stooges slapstick, because he knew it was really important to have you laugh, sometimes just to break the tension.
Yeah, and when we had Pat Harrington on TV Confidential back in 2012, Pat specifically talked about that. If I remember correctly, during the early stages of producing that first season of the original One Day at a Time, I believe Lear took Pat aside and basically reminding him, your job is to ease the tension every episode. Even if you're only doing one scene, 9 times out of 10, your one scene is going to come after a very poignant or heated argument between Anne and one of her daughters or both of her daughters. And your role as Schneider is to sort of break up the tension. And again, it's that deft balance of humor and comedy that Lear did so well. And Pat understood that.
Yeah, I think he called it his 5 minutes or his 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes the show was about him, so they had to have other ways of breaking that. But usually that was his job. And he would expect the writers to make those the best minutes. And so he had a great position in a lot of ways because he would be sometimes the funniest thing in the episodes, but he also had a crucial and important role to be able to do that. That's why the Schneider character changed, actually, over the course of the season, because he was kind of, especially by today's standards, initially kind of gross and creepy, especially in the pilot. Not quite as funny and not nearly as comfortable as someone you'd ever want to have in your home at all. And after a while, he truly became family. In the first season, there were stories about him feeling, why wasn't he included? And then after a while, it became, well, why wouldn't he be included?
Yeah, as you're alluding to, the show premiered end of 1975, started 1976. Attitudes were very different. There were still remnants of chauvinism, both on television and in our culture, and Schneider was sort of a remnant of that, at least as originally conceived, and he saw himself as God's greatest gift to women. And so the fact that you have this pseudo-macho man contrast with a very strong, independent woman in Anne Romano who didn't necessarily need a man in order to fulfill her life, or had time for a man because she was busy raising her 2 teenage daughters and trying to make a living and keep the apartment running, during the inflation era in 1976. And one difference between the new One Day at a Time and the old One Day at a Time is in the portrayal of the Schneider character. It's hard to describe what they're doing. They wisely stayed away from any connection with Pat Harrington.
Of course, there's no way to possibly imitate, and it would be absolutely absurd and ridiculous, not just because that character's out of date, because the Schneider character was a 1970s sort of younger Ed Norton. He's the kind of person who would have been comfortable at Archie Bunker's lodge. In fact, he had his own lodge. He would have hung out with the same kind of blue-collar guys and laughed at the same kind of things. And he was slightly more enlightened, though, because he was a little younger, and he interacted more. Archie was more insulated in that he wasn't forced to work among the tenants like Schneider was. And so he was learning. He got out more. And so he was different in that way, and he evolved. Archie did too. And it was really the bar, if you look at Archie Bunker's Place, not just the series, but just when he bought the bar on All in the Family. They say, oh, he mellowed on the later show, but he did a little bit more on All in the Family too, because sometimes it just takes getting out and meeting people and finding out that not everybody thinks exactly the way you do. And sometimes there are other ways of thinking, and not everybody is the cartoon that you might have created in your mind that opens up your ways of thinking. And so that was kind of where Schneider was. The one on the new show isn't anything like that. The only thing that's the same is that he is sort of the building super, but that is it. The new one is a sort of a rich kid, burnout, ne'er-do-well, was sort of stuck working in this building, didn't think he'd have to for very long. It ends up that's all he's really good at, but he's sort of a hot mess and very strange and bizarre and quirky and a little kind of uncomfortable to be around, and yet lovable in a very strange, quirky way, the way the other one was, but almost undefinable. That's not necessarily a criticism of the actor. Todd Grinnell, I think, is the name of the actor playing him. It's harder to define who this Schneider is because his role is not the same. They don't need the 5 minutes like they needed it before. This is a larger cast, and they have the grandmother to come in and be funny too.
Yes, that's a very good point. Rita Moreno, I mean, unless the storyline revolves around her, and a couple of them have, Rita Moreno usually has the 5 minutes to break up the drama into comedy that Pat Harrington did on the original. We're talking about the new One Day at a Time, which currently airs on Netflix, with the original One Day at a Time. All 9 seasons of the original One Day at a Time are available on DVD through our friends at Shout Factory. The only thing in common, I would say, between Pat Harrington Schneider and Todd Grinnell Schneider is that they're both hipster doofuses.
Yes, they are very much. They do live in their own strange world. The new one even much more than the other one. You can't quite figure out what world the new one is because he seems to be looking for new worlds, exploring them right then and there even. It's just difficult to define exactly where he is, except that he's almost like one of the kids, whereas the other Schneider was a surrogate adult.
Yeah, I think that's a very good comparison. And we mentioned the actress who plays the lead on the new One Day at a Time, Justina Machado, who I knew first from 6 Feet Under, played a much different character on that. She since did FX, which was more of an action drama. This is not only a good character for her, it's a good showcase to show what a diverse performer she is.
She's just one of those actors that has that lead presence that's so golden for a sitcom. It's so taken for granted when you've got to be that anchor. You know, the Ted Danson kind of actor, the Mary Tyler Moore kind of actor that is the central character. It's really, really rare to have somebody that is that riveting as a central performer, and she's really got that. And she can be really funny. She can throw a line with such tremendous timing, and yet she can go right into drama. And they put her in the profession. She's working in the doctor's office and as a nurse, and so that gives a lot of opportunity for stories there. And then you've got the military experience and whole issue of she and her ex-husband and the 9/11, and they do flashback stories. It was an excellent episode about their daughter, and their daughter is a lesbian, and the father's dealing with that and not accepting of that. And there's this extraordinarily touching episode that goes back to when she was born and how he was saying, I could never be mean to you. I could never be cruel to you. And yet he's so rejecting of her in the present day. And the show goes back and forth and back and forth. It so makes its point so dramatically. That's the kind of television that Norman Lear was known for. So it's like, this is what we've been missing. So it's kind of cool. How old is he, like 93?
93, and God bless him, still ticking and still has things to do and shows to create and things to say, some of which he is addressing through the new One Day at a Time. All 3 seasons of One Day at a Time are now available on Netflix. And the remarkable thing about the Netflix One Day at a Time, Greg, is, yes, there are some overriding arcs that wrap all 13 episodes together each season, but This is very much a show that could play on network TV today. And in many respects, each episode is self-contained, not serialized, the way most shows are done today. I think it's a testament that Netflix is airing the show because, well, I'm sure it was offered to the networks because you don't have to deal with ratings. You don't have to deal with the sort of things that a network or cable show has to face today. If you make 13 shows, you know they're going to air. And so you don't have to worry about being cut short in the middle of the order. And you can tell the story you want to tell in your time.
I think that the networks have a lot of, they have a lot of thinking to do, and obviously they're doing it because of the rapidity that the television industry is going through, the way people are consuming things. I don't think they're necessarily understanding how people are consuming these shows because they'll put out so many of these in one day. They'll put out in one day at a time.
Yeah.
All of the shows are on Netflix at the same time. Now, that doesn't necessarily matter to a network. It's like, oh, my goodness, we can't show them all at once. They'll watch them all at once. Well, that's not necessarily true because not everybody binges. Some people do. What this basically is doing is putting the video, the VCR, the DVD inside the Netflix selector. It's the equivalent of having a DVR at the Netflix headquarters instead of in your box or the DVD box in your house. It's basically just another way of the stuff being stored. It's being stored someplace else. And that's the way people look at it. It's not the way necessarily the companies look at it, the marketing people look at it, because they're not necessarily the consumers. They have to go research that because they're not the ones who watch these shows. But basically, what's happening here is it's almost like you have these shows, you get them all at once, you can watch them every day, like a syndicated show where it's being stripped for syndication. You watch one every day. You can watch a couple of them. Or like with MASH, they'd run 2 a day. You can watch them all, and then you can go back and watch the ones you like and pick out the ones, which is maybe you would do with a DVD. Like, oh, I like this one and this one. You can watch them all and then have a friend come over or your brother, sister, spouse, whatever, significant other, and say, oh, let's watch these. It's the same exact process that you have with any kind of home video tool. It's just not putting the network in charge of when it's on. But it's no different than DVR. It's no different than home video. It's just the holding system that's different. It's a bank. It's basically banking episodes. That's the way the sitcom feels when it's on a service like Netflix. And I think that Amazon and Netflix and Hulu are starting to see that it doesn't really matter whether they throw them all on at once or they parcel them out. And in some ways, putting them all on at once is a powerful influence because you can really get into the shows when you can watch them when you want to, than to have to remember in your busy life, oh, there's another one on Tuesday. Oh, there's not going to be. People are going to have lives, and the more things that conform to the way we're living, the more things we're going to be buying with our money. So I think this is kind of the way things are going. I like this.
Greg Ehrbar is with us as we talk about both the original One Day at a Time, which is now available on DVD, and the new One Day at a Time, which just launched its 3rd season on Netflix. We'll continue our conversation with Greg after this quick time out here on TV Confidential. The Perpetual Paycheck. 5 secrets to getting a job, keeping a job, and earning income for life in the loyalty-free workplace. The Perpetual Paycheck, now available as an audiobook through audible.com, iTunes, and Amazon.com.
Cam Caricatures will keep the fun rolling at your next party, convention, or event through a live video feed. As friends or colleagues gather around the webcam, I can see them on my screen, and they can view my caricatures come to life on their own screen. The completed black and white drawing will then be emailed to you to print out. Pricing and details are at hamcamcaricatures.com. That's HAMCAMCARICATURES.com.
TV Confidential is available online for listening on demand as a podcast through iTunes, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else where you could download podcasts. You can also listen to recent episodes of TV Confidential on demand for free on the Listen Now page at televisionconfidential.com.
Buying or selling a home can be one of the most stressful things we'll ever do in life, but it doesn't have to be. And no one knows better than our friends at Front Porch Realty Group. They're a community of realtors serving the Northern Bay Area of California that cares about their clients as individuals first and foremost. Whether you're a first-time buyer or looking to lease or sell your property in the Bay Area, Front Porch Realty Group will help you through this important transition by providing you with the right information for your situation while lessening the pain. They also work with a network of realtors throughout California who provide the same high caliber of customer service. Call Front Porch Realty Group at 415-886-7411 for a realtor referral near you. You can also visit their website, frontporchrealtygroup.com, for more information on the services they provide, including upcoming workshops and seminars. For more information, call 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com. Front Porch Realty Group. They'll find the solution that works best for you.
Uber is the mobile app that connects you with a driver for immediate transportation. Request a ride at the tap of a button and you have a driver curbside in minutes. You can choose to be driven in a black car, SUV, or you can choose UberX, the low-cost Uber, for a ride in a hybrid or mid-range car. Payment is seamless and cashless. Billed to your card on file with no need to tip. Enter the promo code TV Confidential after you download the app to receive a free first ride up to $20. For more information, go to get.uber.com/go/TV Confidential.
If you've listened to TV Confidential and like what you've heard, please consider supporting our efforts by becoming a patron of our show through Patreon. It's easy to do and costs as little as $1 a month. For more information, go to patreon.com/TV Confidential or click the Patreon button on the home page at tvconfidential.net.
Hello, this is Joe Campanella coming to you on TV Confidential.
This is it. This is life, the one you get to go and have a ball.
Ed Roberts with a reminder that we will replay our conversation with actress Julie Adams beginning at the top of the hour. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Greg Ehrbar is with us as we continue our look at both the original One Day at a Time that originally aired on CBS and the reimagining of One Day at a Time that currently airs on Netflix. All 9 seasons of the original One Day at a Time with Bonnie Franklin, Pat Harrington, Mackenzie, Phillips, and Valerie Bertinelli are available on DVD through our friends at Shout Factory. Joseph Campanella, who had a recurring role as Ann Romano's ex-husband on One Day at a Time, he passed on recently, and I forgot that he played Ed Cooper, and it was a rare opportunity for him to do comedy. He was, even though, like a lot of actors, they were trained in comedy and drama, especially if you're part of the studio system, Campanella got typecast as authority figures on dramatic shows. He guest starred pretty much every major dramatic show of the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of fun to see him in a comedy series, even if he's at odds during the dramatic scenes with Bonnie Franklin.
He was perfectly cast because he was the alpha male. He was the epitome of the guy that she married young when it was the thing to do. You marry this guy who makes you feel safe and will take care of you and will have all the answers. And in that era, when women were told that's what they should do and thought that's what she wanted to do, and he totally bought into what he felt that's what it should do. He was the kind of guy that did that, and he played that role perfectly, and that's what was discussed quite often. And between the yelling and screaming, because there was an awful lot of that between the two of them.
It was a Norman Lear show.
It was one of the yelliest shows. There was actually probably more yelling on One Day at a Time than Maude, believe it or not, because there was a lot more conflicts. You know, you had divorce issues, you had teenage daughters, then you had a teenage boy, then you had young marrieds. One Day at a Time, I think, did very well in daytime. It was very much like a soap because the storyline dramatically changed over the 9 seasons. Besides the Campanella story, Anne had several romantic situations, and then she got married at the end. But she had a very serious romance that resulted in the son of someone she became very close to. That was the Glenn Scarpelli character moving in, who stayed there for a while and became a major character. Then you also, at the very end, the show completely transformed. And of course, with a Norman Lear show or any show, behind the scenes, there's also things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew, who was reading TV Guide or anything else, that there was an enormous amount of problems with Mackenzie Phillips' addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And how she was fired at least once, maybe twice, and they brought her back. She was actually on the show more than I recall, because to be looking at the headlines back then, you'd think she was hardly on the show. But there was a season or two where she wasn't there at all. But at one point, she was married to Michael Lembeck's character.
Captain Cool.
Captain Cool. Yeah, they stuck a beard on him, and he's not Captain Cool. He's suddenly Max Horvath, married to Julie, and they have a child, but then all of a sudden her character just leaves, and he's a single father. So then they have a single father storyline. And then you've got Barbara, who was America's Sweetheart, Valerie Bertinelli, and I actually read her book, and she was pretty frank in the fact that she wasn't quite the sweetheart we thought she was. It isn't a shattering account. I mean, she's pretty straightforward with it, but she was a human being and did some human things. And her character got married to a dental student, played by a guy who's not a household name. Boyd Gaines was his name. And he actually didn't make a huge splash in TV, but became a big Broadway star, won 4 Tonys. And his character married her. Shelley Fabaret was in it for the last few seasons. She was terrific. She played completely against character, played Anne's rival, who was sort of like this Sue Ann Nivens kind of thing, and she was terrific. And so she was a recurring character. But what ended up happening was Anne was not in a lot of stories. Suddenly you've got the two couples living in a house together, Anne making occasional appearances. Then Nanette Fabre is the grandmother, sort of coming in there because Julie was gone. So now you have the grandmother and the son-in-law and the couple and the kids. I mean, one day at a time, it was sort of like My Three Sons, where it suddenly became My Three Sons, my daughter-in-law, their children. You needed a scorecard.
Yes. And lest we forget, she married Dr. Johnny Fever.
Yeah, and then she marries Dr. Johnny Fever, who was... But it was actually a pretty good matchup because she was a very contentious person, her character was, and he was this mellow to the point of sometimes frustration guy.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting parallel. It was an interesting couple story. It wasn't like, oh, we've run out of ideas. Maybe they had, but bringing in someone like Howard Hesseman was actually a great move because it was an interesting thing. And then Howard Hesseman's son, is the guy who is married to Anne Romano's daughter. So it's very much like Sands Through the Hourglass. So are the days of our lives. But very funny, it's still very entertaining. And then at one point, when Barbara's marrying Mark, the dental student, and he's going to college, they stay in the dorm for a while. And then you've got a wacky group of college kids that are sort of groovy and fun. And it's almost like, is this some sort of a pilot thing where you're for 2 or 3 episodes, we're spending most of the time in this college group of people and we're hardly seeing Anne. So it's like this show is really going in all these different directions. I don't know what the story behind it is. It wasn't in Valerie Bertinelli's book. There was no Bonnie Franklin bio. All I can guess is that CBS was constantly looking at different ways to branch off. It was spin-off city back then, and television was rapidly changing in the late 70s. Things were getting much lighter and a little bit less messagey in the late 70s, so that could be why.
We're breaking down all 9 seasons of the original One Day at a Time, which are available as a box set through our friends at Shout Factory. What sort of extra features are available in the box set, Greg?
There is an interview with Mackenzie Phillips and Glenn Scarpelli, which is kind of fun. And she talks about the song lyric. So walk on. What is it? You'd have to see the interview to see, but she says, for years I thought this is what they were saying, and they were actually saying something else. So walk on, or something like that. And she says, I never knew this is what they were really saying. And she's on the show.
Oh,
and
so up on your feet.
So up on
your feet somewhere.
Yeah.
Gloria Estefan does the theme song for the Netflix show, which is a nice touch. They didn't have to do that, but I think it's a nice touch. And she performs it very well. And like a traditional sitcom, like the original One Day at a Time, the theme song gets you in the mood for that show. And lest we forget us while we're still on the topic of Mackenzie Phillips, she appeared, going back to the PSTD storyline of Justina Machado's character. Mackenzie Phillips played a shrink who ran a group therapy session for war veterans coping with PTSD, and I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, and that's the thing to remember, too, is that it wasn't a matter of, well, she's being a problem, let's boot her out of here. They tried really hard to work with her and keep her in the show as much as they could. They were a very tight team on this show. Everybody bonded as much as they could and stayed friends long beyond Bonnie Franklin and Mackenzie Phillips and Valerie Bertinelli and all of them. And to hear Pat Harrington talk about them, he was fiercely loyal to them and was very, very proud of what Bonnie Franklin did for that show. He seemed to feel as if she didn't get the credit she deserved, especially being a woman back in those days, being the head of a show, because it's been mentioned several times in various accounts of these shows that in the first season, it wasn't all that great because it was supposed to be about the struggles of a divorced woman on her own, trying to realize her potential on her own. And meanwhile, she's got this young, wealthy lawyer for a boyfriend, and the problems are basically, what am I going to do with the dance mom and stuff like that? And she was frustrated and really upset, and apparently she went to Carol O'Connor, and he advised her to fight back. And I think this is in one of the documentaries on the DVD set. He said, you have to do this. And she said, who's going to listen to me? And he said, well, you're the lead. You've got to do it. And I think that cost her. In those days, you could be labeled difficult, whether you're a man or a woman. But I think in her case, she was not new to television, but she was new to television stardom. And some people might have found that off-putting, I'm guessing. But she had to do it. And within a year, that show totally changed. If you watch the first season and then you watch the second, you could see that the show became more about, especially in the last couple of episodes where they addressed the divorce and why they had split. At the very end of the first season, the show kind of snapped back into what it needed to be. That's why people liked it so much, because no matter how the storylines wriggled and no matter how the cast changed, you wanted to know how these people turned out. And that's why these shows last. You know, people say, well, why do these stay on long and why do people stick with them? Because you got to have strong characters that you want to travel places with. You know, some episodes are better than others, but you want to see these characters over and over and you want to see what happens to them. And if you don't get them there, if you don't make the show good to begin with, you know, or at least within that first couple of seasons, you're not going to do that. And she did that. He really, really felt she did that. I don't know that she ever, I think she may have gotten a nomination, an Emmy nomination. She never won. Pat Harrington did. It was kind of a thankless role to play this lead character because there were not a lot of women doing what she was doing. You know, Mary Richards was this sort of aw shucks. She was America's sweetheart. She was lovable and had to sometimes be abrasive in the things that she did. It was nice later when you had Shelley Fabre's character come in and be kind of this. It was a great rivalry because suddenly Anne was not. She had somebody to bounce off of, and that was fun. It actually worked out quite well, but it was a tough period. So it's kind of nice that he was so proud of her and stood up for her for that.
Greg, what other extra features are available in the One Day at a Time DVD package?
There's a little guide that comes in it, and there's a reunion show that I believe was a special where there's a panel where they all talk about each other. And that's kind of nice because having them all on the stage, of course, can never happen again. So it's important. This is an important show. For those who really loved it, it's important. For those who may have never watched it or not even seen, well, what's the big deal? It's a reflection of society and where we were, where we're going, where we're coming. You know, in hindsight, when you look at it, it's like it doesn't seem like any big deal now, and it almost seems kind of simple. But it wasn't then, and so you gotta look at it as maybe not quite as up to date as now, but as pretty important. So it's definitely worth looking at.
Definitely worth looking at. All 9 seasons of One Day at a Time are available on DVD through our friends at Shout Factory. Greg Ehrbar covers music, film, and TV DVDs for CartoonResearch.com, AnimationScoop.com. Greg, always remember, never forget. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Ed.
We'll replay our conversation with Julie Adams when we come back for hour number 2 of TV Confidential. Stay with us.
If you haven't been listening to TV Confidential,
This is who you're missing.
Michelle Nichols, Adrienne Barbeau,
Leonard Maltin,
Joyce Phillips,
Peter Onorati,
Judy Norton,
Ken Berry,
Rhonda Shear, Michelle Lee, Jacqueline Smith,
Lou Antonio,
Shirley Jones,
And many, many more of your favorite celebrities and people behind the scenes in the world of television. That's TV Confidential. Every week on this station and every day online at televisionconfidential.com.
Accredited by Guinness World Records, welcome to Archival Television Audio Incorporated, a peerless TV soundtrack archive preserving the audio from television's first 3 decades, the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the golden and silver age of television.
For more information, go to atvaudio.com.
Be part of our conversation. If you have thoughts on what you've heard tonight, whether you agree or disagree, we want to hear from you. Send us an email, talk@tvconfidential.net, talk@tvconfidential.net, and we'll work your comments into our next program.
Uber is the mobile app that connects you with a driver for immediate transportation. Request a ride at the tap of a button and you have a driver curbside in minutes. You can choose to be driven in a black car, SUV, or you can choose UberX, the low-cost Uber for a ride in a hybrid or mid-range car. Payment is seamless and cashless, billed to your card on file with no need to tip. Enter the promo code TV Confidential after you download the app to receive a free first ride up to $20. For more information, go to get.uber.com/go/TV Confidential.
Hey, did you know that TV Confidential has a YouTube channel? It's true. Check it out right now at youtube.com/TV Confidential. There you can also listen to the last few episodes of TV Confidential on demand, absolutely free. And please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/TV Confidential, youtube.com/TV Confidential. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/TV Confidential. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying our podcast. If you're listening to us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TV Confidential, be sure to hit the subscribe button.